Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Sabbath, happy Saturday afternoon. And thank you so much for joining us one more time
Yes.
for another episode of COTO's Family Life. We are Edward and Debbie Smith, certified family life educators, and we are so excited that you have decided to spend your hour with us once again.
We appreciate you.
Yes, we appreciate you. So a couple of housekeeping things before we get into this great content. Number one, like the video. Number two, share the video.
Absolutely.
And
well, each person, I'm sorry to interrupt, babe, but make sure each person share at least 5 times. I'm sure you have a lot of friends. Share at least 5 times.
And after you do that, make sure you have something to write with and you have a notepad, because we have some information that you want to make sure you write down today.
Absolutely.
As you can see, it's just the two of us. We have no guests today, so you have the Smiths all to yourself.
Just the two of us.
But no worries, no worries. We have some great content for you anyhow.
Yes.
But before we get into what we're going to talk about today, we actually received an inbox from one of our listeners from last week's show. So we wanted to respond to their question. So for those of you who were with us last week, we talked about digital suicide and how technology enhances, but can still damage relationships, how we communicate with one another. And we received a very interesting question. And it says, hello, brother and sister Smith. Last week, you mentioned random phone checks. At what point does that become an invasion of a child's privacy?
Ooh.
Ooh. So, babe, you want to answer that first?
Listen, I'm very old school, babe. In my opinion, you are a child. We're not talking about an adult. We're talking about a child. Living in my house, you have limited privacy in my house. Am I gonna burst your door open, when you are changing your clothes or something like that? Absolutely not. But, I have the right, I still have the right to, politely, respectfully comes into your room and check your room, check whatever. Now, the same thing applies to the phone. I am paying the bill. So at any given point, I can say, okay, let's do a random phone check. And here's what it is, babe. Oftentimes when we do random phone checks, it has little or nothing to do with, our child. But we just want to make sure that he or she's looking on stuff that cannot harm them, because a lot of times children are so oblivious to things, and they can walk into a lion's den without realizing that they are walking into a lion's den. So, protection, my job is to protect my children, to protect my household. And so me doing random phone check, I'm not looking for, something to punish you. I'm just looking for something to help you, to guide you not to go there.
Absolutely. And as you know, our brains are not even fully developed until we're in our 20s.
Yes.
And so you have a 9-year-old with a smartphone, a 12-year-old with a smartphone, even a 17-year-old with a smartphone. They still need guidance on making proper decisions, guidance on even sites that they're visiting. And so, like Ed said, it is a precaution. As your child grows, there are different limitations that will be set. There will be different expectations. They will be held to different standards. However, we do believe that it is still appropriate. You are not violating privacy. It's a great, sometimes I go in my son's room and I lay on the bed with him while he's scrolling through his phone. And then I'll see something and we'll stop and have a conversation about it. So again, it's not about finding something to punish you, but it's about looking for opportunities to have some different types of conversations to see what is going on. Sometimes there are people in their phone or different apps that they're in and they're talking to people that they don't know. That is dangerous, but you
Absolutely.
won't know that to discuss that if you don't know what's happening. So again, we're not talking about violating privacy of an adult child who's living at home with you, but your underage children still need the guidance. They still need the oversight.
Absolutely.
So we love that. Please, 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 if you have questions, this person actually reached out to us on Facebook. We do have a Family Life email address, so you can email us, family@COTO, COTO, We will keep your name anonymous, but feel free to reach out if you have a question or a comment.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. So a couple weeks ago, some of our social media friends started sharing some information that they found. It was about China. As you know, China was hit really hard with the coronavirus. And as they began to come out of the coronavirus, there was a story that the number of divorces are rising drastically. And so we wanted to know if that same phenomenon was happening here in the US. So we did a search and we found that actually, yes, many states, attorneys in many states across the country are reporting that their phones are ringing off the hook with people looking to divorce their spouses.
Looking for a way out.
Looking for a way out.
Wow.
In fact, the New York Times ran an article on April 3rd. The title of the article, Coronavirus is Making Couples Sick of Each Other. Lawyers see divorces surge. And the writer of the article actually interviewed a couple lawyers between New York, again, to California, and they in fact confirmed people are realizing that they cannot stand each other.
Mercy.
And the attorney shared a couple of the people that have reached out to him. So one wife calls and she's saying that she realizes after 23 years of marriage, this is not who she's meant to be with.
Jesus.
So she wants to know, how soon can I file the papers now? And he's saying the courts are not open. Well, how soon can I do it?
Wow.
He got a call from a hedge fund manager, filthy rich, at home with his family in the Hamptons. That's where they're quarantined together, in the Hamptons. And he's calling his attorney to say, I want out. How quickly can you get me out? And so it is a serious, serious problem. In fact, there is a meme circulating on social media, and there's a long line of people. It's wrapped around and around, and you see the sign, they're all headed to divorce court. And people are laughing, and in a way it's funny, but then again, it's not funny, because these are marriages. These are, unions that God established. We know that marriage was established by God, and they're being thrown away because people have issues within their marriages. So coronavirus is a pandemic. Do you know that there's some other pandemics that could be affecting your marriage? And if you don't address them, if you don't find a cure, if you don't get a vaccine for those viruses, they can eat your marriage from the inside out.
Mercy.
So that's what we're going to talk about today. So again, make sure you have your pen, make sure you have something to write with, and here we go.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about, well, actually the correct terminology is 4 killers of a healthy relationship, but we're going to call it the 4th pandemic of a healthy relationship. And, it's very important, because every relationship, I'm sure must have gone through 1 or 2 of these. So let me start off let me start off by saying God does not determine the success of your marriage. You do. God will only do what we allow him to do.
That's good.
All right. And so now we're going to look at the four pandemic of a healthy relationship. These are behaviors that if they occur regularly, we will lead to a troubling future. Again, these are behavior, if they occur regularly, they will lead to a troubling future. And so the first one is criticism. Wow. The first one is criticism. Criticism creeps in when complaints are ignored. Complaints are okay, but if ignored, complaints lead to criticism.
Wow, that's good. And complaints are statements of unmet needs.
Absolutely.
So I complain to my husband because I have a need that's not being met.
Babe, you need to put up the pictures on the wall, and the pictures have been sitting there for 2 months.
Yes.
Right.
And that's the need that I have. As a wife, I want to see, my house being, beautifully kept.
You want the aesthetics of your house.
That's right. And so I'm asking my husband to do this for me, and month after month, sometimes even year after year, it's not getting done. And so that criticism now turns into contempt, because I've asked you over and over and over again. And now I'm not just criticizing, but now there's a level of contempt to it. Contempt is intentionally abusing your spouse verbally, emotionally, or psychologically. So it goes from, babe, you have not put that picture up. Like I've asked you 1,000 times.
Right.
To you never do anything that I ask you to. That's why my mother told me not to marry you, because you're no good.
Mercy. You're lazy.
Right.
You come from a lazy family. I know his brother. I know his sister. All of them are not working. They are lazy.
Exactly. So now I'm not talking about the picture anymore.
No.
It's not about what my unmet need is. Right. Now I'm attacking your character.
Absolutely.
That's when we get to a place of contempt. So number one, remember, is criticism. Okay. Number two is contempt, which expresses the complete absence of any admiration. Contempt is toxic. It is an indication that the marriage is beginning to fall apart. When contempt goes unchecked, it then leads to number three. Number three is defensiveness. So after I criticize you, that doesn't work. After it leads to contempt and I begin to attack your character, now you become defensive. What happens? One person starts off the conflict, right? We have an issue. We're talking about the issue. It's not getting resolved. Now the other person's feelings gets caught up in the conflict too. It leads to defensiveness.
Yeah, and so I, by way of default, I am going to be defensive, because now you're talking about my character. You're telling me who I am when I know that I'm someone else.
That's right. So defensiveness is self-protection in the form of righteous indignation. So not only am I going to protect myself, and I'm not going to let you call me lazy and no good, but I begin to blame you for why the picture is not hung up.
Mercy. Right.
Well, if you didn't nag me all the time, and your mother told you not to marry me, my mother told me not to marry you because you are a nag and you want control. And so this thing has now escalated from a picture being hung up to we're both attacking one another's character.
My mommy told me that it's better to live in the corner of a house than to live in a house with you.
With a contentious woman, right? That's like the dripping pipe.
Yes.
But that's exactly what happens. We blame one another for what's wrong in the relationship, and it escalates from there. So you have criticism, you have contempt. Number three was defensiveness. And then that leads to number four, which is stonewalling. Stonewalling. Folks, stonewalling is a dangerous place to be when you are married. One or both of the partners check out of the relationship. They act as if they could care less about what their spouse is saying. It's like they become roommates now. Silent treatment.
Or just minimum talking,
Minimum talking.
Did you pay the bill today? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. 85% of stonewalling is done by husbands. Husbands tend to shut down. A lot.
Yeah, we're known for shutting down after a while, but but the sad part about it, babe, that statistics also show that whenever a woman stonewalls, it's very hard to bring her back, right? A man is easy to come back, because a man shuts down because, okay, you're done, you're finished, so can we move on? And so he's back. But, it takes much longer period of time for a woman to stonewall. However, when she stonewalls, oftentimes it's a wrap.
Yeah. When a woman shuts down, 9 times out of 10, she's done. She's over it. And it's a very, very dangerous place for husbands and wives to go.
Yeah.
So we're going to review those 4 again, because we want to make sure that you got them, right? Number 1 is criticism.
Yes.
Criticism occurs when your needs are unmet, okay? From criticism, we get to contempt because we're tired of asking for the same thing over and over again. From criticism, we get to defensiveness. The other party now becomes defensive. They have to protect themselves because in the contempt stage, you are criticizing their character. And finally, the 4th stage, or the 4th pandemic that can help a marriage to collapse, is stonewalling, where one or both parties completely shut down in the relationship.
But babe, let me ask you a question. When we're dating, we are so quick to please each other. You have a need, and I realize that you have a need during my dating process. And ta-da, you're being surprised with, that need, oh, babe, did you do that? I can't believe you did that for me. And so what happened within the marriage that causes us to no longer jump at needs?
Yeah. And so it's complacency. And we should actually turn this into the 5 pandemics. And complacency should actually become number 1.
Absolutely.
Because when we are complacent, the criticism come much more frequent. We're complacent. We don't care what we say. We are flip with our mouth. We always have a comeback. And so complacency is what leads to a lot of issues within a marriage. We get so comfortable. We're not trying anymore. We're not trying to, outlove each other. It's just, it is what it is. You're here. You're not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. Who cares? So complacency is really, really an issue.
Yeah. And so within the complaint, could that be the reason why whenever the female gets a chance to speak, and speak in terms of the husband is listening, she will just ramble off a plethora of things because now I'm
watch it. What? Ramble on. Watch it.
That's a ramble off.
Ramble off on whichever.
A plethora of things. And I'm wrong choice of word. But the problem, the point that I'm trying to get at is a lot of times, most men don't listen because some of us feel as though our spouse is rambling, and sometimes also we prefer that to give us one project at a time, that kind of stuff. But however, there are times also that whenever you're in a situation and you feel like you have your husband undivided attention, you're inclined to talk about a lot of issues because they have been filed away for so long that that they have been ignored. So now is an opportune moment. Since I'm having your attention, let's talk about these things.
And we definitely have to talk about that at another session, because that's a whole 1-hour conversation by itself. The fact that men and women are wired differently. We just are. Studies even show that women use 3 times as much words in a day as a man. And so we're just different. We're wired differently. God made us to be different. And because of those differences, sometimes handling and managing conflict is difficult, but it's not impossible.
Absolutely.
And there are no conflict-free relationships as we transition, because we talked about those 4 pandemics, and now we're going to talk about how to fight fear within your marriage to prevent these pandemics from taking over.
Right.
There are no conflict-free marriages, right? And so our job as husband and wife is not to avoid the conflict, but it's to face them head on and resolve them or manage them as best as we can.
So don't go past that so fast, because a lot of times in relationship, we think that we have to resolve everything. This has to be resolved before we can move forward. Well, we're here to tell you that not every situation, not every conflict is resolvable. You just can't. You just won't be able to resolve everyone. What you can do, however, is to manage them and learn how to manage them better so that your relationship can be in a better place.
Absolutely. There is nothing wrong with agreeing to disagree on a topic within your marriage.
Right.
Now, don't get us wrong. It cannot be those major topics like, oh gosh, how to raise your children cannot be something that you can't resolve. You have to get to a place where you can resolve that because your children's future depend on it. You have to be in agreement. And so there are some conflicts that must be resolved. They must be. However, there are some things that won't be resolved. You come from different places. You have different perspectives.
Different personality.
It's totally okay to disagree on a topic. We're not the same person. We're not the same individual. We are different. So even though the Bible says the two become one flesh, we still have our own personalities, our own personality traits. And so there will be times when we disagree on things.
Absolutely.
We might even disagree on politics. We might disagree. He might be a Republican and I'm a Democrat, or the other way around.
I'm not a
Stop it. But so there will be fundamental things that we disagree on. But those things that impact how our marriage moves forward, the purpose of our marriage, the mission of our marriage, the vision of our marriage, the direction that we're going to, those things we have to be able to resolve.
Absolutely.
So we want to make that very, very clear.
That's good.
So,
that was good. That was
Thank
very
you,
good.
Thank you. So now that we've gone through those 4 things, now let's get into how to fight fear in a marriage. How do you fight fear? We're going to give you 10 tips for fighting fear in your marriage. Tip number 1. If there's a winner and a loser, you both lose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Say that again, baby. That is so good. That is so good.
If there's a winner and a loser, you both lose. Do not fight to win. When we are in conflict, remember that the point is to understand each other, not to dominate each other or win for personal vindication. You and your spouse are a team. You're a team. You're not fighting against one another. You're fighting what's out there.
Come on.
You're fighting that thing together as a team.
Come on.
So don't fight for personal vindication. Don't fight to keep score. Oh, I won this argument. You won the last argument. It's not about keeping score. So when you approach conflict, remember, if one of you wins and one of you lose, you both lose. Number 2, no running. No running. Conflict is normal. Do not flee from the conflict. Do not leave your home in the midst of an argument. So we were counseling a couple, and every time they got into an argument, he would leave. He wouldn't say anything. He would just leave. That was his way of cooling off. When he walked out, in her mind, he's leaving. He's gone. He doesn't feel that it's worth fighting for. So when we were sitting and talking to them, and we asked, him, why does he do that? He says, well, I feel things getting heated and I need to cool off. And we say, that's perfectly fine. And even if things are so bad that you feel that you have to leave, you need to tell your wife, listen, I need 10 minutes to walk around the block and cool off. I'll be back. And when he started to do that, she was okay with him walking out 10 minutes, he was back home.
Yeah.
So don't just leave your house. Don't just go sleep somewhere else overnight. Don't go to your friend's house with an overnight bag every time there's an argument. You have to stay and figure that thing out.
You see, what happens is that whenever you leave, you're saying to your spouse that you're not valued enough, and so you, as my wife stated, you have to say to your spouse, listen, just give me 10 minutes. You're making valid points right now, but for right now, I just can't, just give me 10 minutes, give me 15 minutes, whatever the time is, because once you do that, you're saying to your spouse that, okay, he respects what I'm saying, and he's willing to listen, but right now he's in a quote unquote funk, he or she for that matter, is in a funk. And so, you need some time just to cool off, just to regroup and come again.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with taking a time out.
Absolutely not.
In fact, we tell couples, when you feel that you're getting into the heat of the moment and you might say something that you're going to regret, it's okay to call a time out.
Absolutely.
In fact, set up a word between the two of you that's the word. So maybe peanuts is your word.
Right.
And in the midst of this argument, if one party says peanuts, everything should stop.
Just stop.
Everything should stop. Go to separate corners of the room, regroup, come back in 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it is that you both have previously agreed upon.
Yeah. And, for those that are listening and you may say, well, brother and sister Smith, this is easier said than done. This does not happen in the real world.
Yes.
It does.
It does, and it can.
And it can. Practice become perfect. If you keep practicing it, it will become a part of who you are, and you become conscious as to when things are escalating, and you say that word, and both parties recognizes that word, and then you just move on.
Yeah. You can't, though, in the heat of the moment, put the plan in place.
No.
You have to have the plan in place before, right?
Before, yeah.
So you choose the word before.
Right.
You choose how long the cool-off period is going to be before. You do that in happy times.
Right.
You do that when you guys are in a great place and you're laid in the bed and you're like, babe, you know what? Let's put together this plan just in case.
Right.
And so again, okay, peanuts, we're done, we're retreating, we're coming back in half an hour. No other conversation is needed until everyone cools off and comes back together.
Absolutely.
So that was number 2, no running. Number 3, shut up and listen. Woo. We have one mouth and we have 2 ears so that we can listen more and speak less.
Right.
Part of our problem is we always want to speak and be heard. We don't even give our spouse the opportunity to finish a sentence. We have to interrupt. We're ready to come back. We're ready to give our point of view. Be quiet and listen. Practice seeing the world from your spouse's point of view.
Come on. That's fire.
That's fire?
That's fire. That is fire. Practice seeing the world from your spouse's point of view.
Yes.
It is not about right and wrong. Your spouse, there's an issue, you probably may not have the issue, but she has an issue, or she has a concern rather, because she has a concern, you have to listen, and you have to learn to see that from her vantage point, so that you can be able to resolve it if possible.
Absolutely. So just to review real quick, number 1, don't fight to win. Number 2, no running. Number 3, shut up and listen. And number 4, check your weapons. This is heavy, and I have to say to my wives, to my women, to my ladies, our mouth, the words that come out of it can be dangerous weapons of mass destruction.
Sharper than any two-edged sword. Wow.
Yikes. Check your weapons. Remember that words can do serious damage.
Of course.
So watch the words that come out of your mouth. Do not deliberately attempt to hurt your spouse by using the most hurtful words or intimate things that they have shared with you in moments of transparency and vulnerability should not be coming back up in the midst of an argument to hurt, to cut down. Watch your weapons, choose your words wisely. You cannot take them back after they've been said.
I'll tell you this right now. I know I laugh a lot. I give a lot of joke, and all that stuff. But honestly speaking, I am not the easiest person to deal with. Really not the easiest person to deal with. I see your face, baby. I just saw your face. And
you heard that here first.
Yes,
breaking news.
Yes.
COTO
I am
Family
not
Life.
the easiest person to deal with. And so, when we first got married, I used to listen whenever she has a problem or a concern. I don't want to call it problem, a concern. I used to listen just for rebuttals. I listened to her, but I did not hear her. And so I listened for rebuttal, and so I'll come back with the rebuttals. So I used to fight to win. Am I still that person? I'm pretty sure that I am, but I have regrouped the way I communicate with my wife. Sometimes she's saying stuff to me, and listen, this is going to be very hard. Sometimes she's saying stuff to me, and I listen attentively, and inside my head, I'm at a boiling point. But then I am very conscious of the words that are coming out of my mouth in my rebuttal, if there needs to be a rebuttal. So I will listen, and subliminally, honestly speaking, I have removed my wife from in front of me, and I replaced her with God. And when it's time for me to respond, I respond to her as though I'm responding to God.
That's good.
It's a very hard thing to do, but it's something that I've practiced over the years. And sometimes I don't want to do it. Sometimes I just want to be human. But for the sake of the relationship, for the respect, for the and all these things, I have to, and this is just my way, I just removed her from in front of me and replaced her with God, and then I respond to her as though I'm responding to God.
That's good, babe. That's good. And for me, I have just learned how to go back to number 3, which is to shut up and listen. That's what works for me as a person who knows that my words can cut and they can really hurt and they can damage, and they have in the past. And yes, you can apologize, you can ask for forgiveness, but when you have words ringing in your ears, it's not always easy to just turn them off. And so to avoid saying words out of my mouth, sometimes I just have to really, really just not say anything at all until I can get my mind to a place where I'm able to have that conversation without using hurtful words. Because when we're hurt, we tend to lash out. We want to hurt back.
And sometimes give your spouse, well, not sometimes, at all times, give your spouse that safe place to land. And it's very important that you do that. Quick story, we're very short, is my wife had something that was eating away the core for months, and she was not sure how to approach me with it and say, until one night she just said, babe. And so she told me, and because of the way that I responded to her, it was like she took, like I said, it was like a burden that just came off of her, because she expected the da 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 da. But no, once again, I have to respond to her as though I'm responding to God.
Yes.
And so the way that I responded to her, it caused that burden to get off, and eventually she said, thank you, babe, for responding that way.
Yeah. And so the way that you react when your spouse shares certain things with you is very important. It's going to set the stage for whether they want to continue to share certain things with
Absolutely.
you. If you react, if you overreact, if you belittle, if you have just a negative response when they come and share things with you, they're not going to want to share them with you.
Absolutely not.
If you're, there are some men who, when we're counseling, they say, I can't talk to my wife because she, the minute I open my mouth, she goes to criticizing. And so if that's your response, if you're not a safe place for your spouse, then they're not going to open up. And so it's really, really critical that you check the way that you respond when your spouse comes to you. So number 5, keep it private. When you're fighting, when you're in a disagreement, keep it private. Have you ever seen a couple fighting in public?
So embarrassing.
It's embarrassing. It's uncomfortable. You want the ground to open up so you can fall through because you feel like you're in the midst of a intimate moment, and truly that's what it is. Our spouse is our priority and should be our center of gravity. Like that should be the person who grounds you. And so you should never fight in public. You should never reveal what is happening in the privacy of your home, of your bedroom, your issues with outsiders who can't help you. If they're not if they're not your accountability partner, if they're not your prayer partner, if this is not a counselor that you're speaking to, then you need to keep certain things about your marriage and your spouse private.
Not even to your children.
Not even to your children. Because what happens, our children will tend to take sides.
Absolutely.
And you don't want to create that type of atmosphere in your home. So keep it private. You shouldn't walk into church on Sabbath morning and everybody knows that you and your spouse are fighting, because you go to open the door for her and she snatches the door out of your hand. Don't hold the door for me. So we have to check ourselves. Keep the fighting private. Number 6 is to take the volume down. When we are angry, we use our angry voices. Maintaining a calm presence in the midst of conflict is very, very challenging. So sometimes my husband will ask me a question. So I have a really bad character flaw. My level of patience. There's something about having to repeat myself that drives me crazy. So I know I'm not a teacher. Like I cannot be a teacher. I cannot sit there and show you and tell you how to do something 50 times. I just can't. And so my husband will ask me something.
Oh, you just won't.
I cannot. My husband will ask me something that maybe he asked me 2 hours ago.
Or 2 days ago. And so my response might have a little edge to it. Right.
So then he'll say, listen to yourself. Don't yell. And I'm like, but I'm not yelling. And sometimes it's not even the volume of your voice. It's just the tone.
The tone. The facial expression. The body move.
I'm praying about that, Joel. I'm praying about my face. I can say a lot without saying a word with my facial expression. And so we have to take the volume down. We have to watch our tone. Sometimes it's not what we say, it's the way that we say it. So we have to pay attention to that. We have to maintain a calm presence in the midst of the conflict. And it's challenging. And again, it takes practice. It doesn't happen overnight.
And here's what it is, once we're doing workshop, we do a lot of stuff, and there's something that we call the 5-to-1 rule. And to each time something negative comes out of your mouth to your spouse, you have to counter that with 5 positives. And it is very important because oftentimes the negative lingers, and it lingers like the coronavirus, and it just stays with you, and it eats away the core of your relationship. And so in order for you to combat that, you have to find 5 or more positives to say.
Yeah, that's good, babe. Number 7 is to start softly. How well do you receive constructive criticism?
Mhm.
Is it easy for you to criticize everyone else, but you can't take it yourself?
Mhm.
Start softly. Be mindful of when you're having the conversation. Be mindful of your spouse's, what are they doing at the time that you're trying to start this conversation? Are they watching their game? Are they watching their favorite television show? Then it might not be the right time to
Right.
start that important
Right.
conversation. So, start softly. There will be times in all marriages when one spouse needs to challenge the other.
Mhm.
So that means not everything, you can't sugarcoat.
Mhm.
If your spouse has a behavior, a habit, a character flaw that is detrimental, especially to their salvation, that's not something that you can
Mhm.
tiptoe around.
Mhm.
You have to challenge them to do better.
Mhm.
And if anyone should be able to do that, it should be your spouse.
Absolutely.
So yes,
Absolutely.
you want to start softly and you want to be gentle with your spouse, but there are times when you might need to be the one to push them and to challenge them
Mhm.
to be their best selves.
Mhm. Mhm.
Number 8, when fighting fairly or handling conflict fairly, is to say, I'm sorry.
And for a lot of people, that is a serious problem. It's very hard for some to say that I'm sorry. But I have a simple method that I've always stated, that saying that I'm sorry does not mean that I was necessarily right or you were necessarily right and I was wrong. It just means that the relationship is more important than the ego that is telling me not to say that I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Say that I'm sorry. The fact that your spouse, watch this, guys, watch this. The fact that your spouse is hurting
Mhm.
should be enough to say I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Because whenever your spouse hurts, if you're not feeling the pain, then something is wrong with that relationship. The fact that your spouse is hurting should be enough for you to say, babe, I'm so sorry.
Absolutely. And that's just such a critical point to make, that the Bible tells us that we are to bear one another's burdens.
Absolutely.
And so if something is weighing heavily on your spouse, then you should be there to help them carry it. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so if your spouse is hurting, if something is hurting them, then you should care and you should hurt too, and should try to help to resolve and mitigate the hurt.
Correct.
So say I'm sorry, huge. Number 9 is to forgive freely. Forgiveness is tough. Forgiveness is hard. Forgiveness doesn't necessarily happen overnight. However, when you make the decision to forgive, and you pray and you ask God to help you, He will help you. We have to become chronic forgivers.
Yeah.
Chronic.
Yeah.
You are forgiving your spouse every single day, and they should be forgiving you every single day, because every day we mess up.
Yeah. And please don't forget #chronic forgivers.
Chronic forgivers. Every single day.
It is, and I'm speaking to those, those who are my Christian folks, it is virtually impossible for you to get on your knee every day and asking God to forgive you when you can't forgive. So you're asking God to do something that you're not willing to do yourself, to your spouse. Remember, your marital relationship mirrors the relationship that Christ has for mankind.
Yes.
And if God is willing to forgive you, and not only forgive you, but treat you as though you have never committed that sin or that wrong, then who are you not to forgive your fellow man?
Absolutely, especially your spouse.
Yeah.
And we already know the types of questions that we're going to get on this forgiveness thing.
Right.
And we're prepared for it. So if you have questions, you have comments, you want to challenge us, don't forget family@cotosda.org. We are more than willing to take those pushbacks.
Absolutely. Or you could ask your question in the comment box right below. we're here to answer as
Yes.
much as we can.
Absolutely. And finally, number 10 is to pray together.
Mm.
And although this is listed as number 10, we believe it should be step 1
Mhm.
and step 10. So
Right.
if you're having a conflict, you should pray before you sit down to try to resolve or manage the conflict.
Mhm.
And you should absolutely pray
Mhm.
at the end of the disagreement as well.
As a matter of fact, babe, any conversation that you're having that it can create friction and whatever, you should start that off with prayer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So pray together to end disagreements. Reunite with each other before God.
Mhm.
Many couples are uncomfortable doing this. They're uncomfortable with praying together because prayer creates an emotional nakedness. It creates an emotional nakedness. And it's ironic that with most of us, we have no problem being physically naked with each other,
Right.
but we don't want to become emotionally naked,
Come on.
vulnerable,
Come
naked
on.
and unashamed before your spouse.
Wow.
And so if you're not praying together with your spouse on a daily basis, we definitely want to challenge you to start right now, today, with praying for one another and with one another. Praying for each other helps you to start paying attention to how the other person is feeling, and it allows God to soften your heart towards your partner. I'm a firm believer that you cannot continue to have contempt for someone that you're praying for on a daily basis.
Absolutely impossible.
So
Absolutely
I
impossible.
definitely pray together before the disagreement and pray together to end the disagreement. So let's review, guys. 10 tips to fight fear in your marriage, because what we want to do is we want to avoid or medicate, help get rid of those 4 toxic pandemics that can tear our relationships apart.
Right.
Okay. And so these are the 10 tips to fighting fear. Number 1, never fight to win. If one wins and one loses, you both lose. Number 2, no running. In the heat of the argument, do not leave your house. Do not go sleep at a friend's house. We only advise leaving the house when there is physical abuse going on.
So we can't sleep on the couch either.
We're not going to sleep on the couch either. In fact, there was a time when one of us tried, we said, no, I'm going to go sleep on the couch. And the other person came out with their comforter, and it's like, well, what are you doing? No, if you're sleeping here, I'm sleeping here too.
Right here.
So,
right here. So we nix that in the butter.
So don't spend the night on the couch.
Right.
Stick it out.
Right.
Fight it out together. Work it out together.
Absolutely.
So don't leave the house. We are all for, remember, have that code word. Make sure you understand what the code word is and what it means. When it's said, everything stops. Retreat to your separate corners and reunite half an hour later, 45 minutes later, whatever the case may be.
Let me say this. Unless you have a conversation with your spouse and say, listen, can you give me 10 minutes, 15 minutes so I could cool off, and then you leave the room? If that's not what you're doing, don't leave the room. That's because what you're doing is that you will be taking the fight to other rooms in the house. So just don't leave the room.
That's right. Stay there and work it out.
Yeah.
So don't fight to win. No running. Number 3 is shut up and listen. Talk less. Listen more. Practice seeing the world from your spouse's point of view. Number 4, check your weapons. Check your weapons. Check your weapons. Watch your words. They can cause some real damage. Number 5, keep it private. Don't take your fights into the public arena. Don't, get everybody, Sister Jones, Sister Smith, everybody knows that you're fighting with your husband or your wife. Keep it private.
Yeah, unless that person is what we call an accountability partner.
That's right.
or a counselor or your
prayer
pastor,
partner.
partner, somebody like that. But outside of that, keep it private.
That's right. Number 6, take the volume down. Don't escalate your voices. Watch your tone. Watch how loud you're getting, because that tends to escalate the situation. Number 7, start softly. Don't go in, attacking the other person. Watch the timing. Are they in a good space to have the conversation? Is this a good time for them to have the conversation? And in fact, ask, you know, babe, is this a good time for us to talk? Ask if this is a good time.
And watch this. And even though the words that are proceeding out of your mouth, pay attention to your spouse's body language.
Yes.
And if the body language is telling you that, oh, I did not receive that statement that you just said, you know, regroup that statement and come again, you know, or you could say to your spouse, babe, I noticed that you just frowned, you know, how did you receive that? Because I want to regroup my statement.
Absolutely. Reframe, you know, say it in a different way. Number 8, say I'm sorry. Even if you feel that you were right and your spouse was wrong, like Ed said, it's not about who's right or wrong. It's about reconciling that relationship. So say I'm sorry. Number 9, forgive freely. Chronic forgivers. Chronic forgivers. And number 10, pray together. The Bible says to pray without ceasing. And if we ever needed to pray, surely we need to pray today.
Good stuff.
Yes, good stuff. We want to, there's a Bible verse, Psalm 127. It says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. And we want to just pause right there as we talk about pandemics in our relationships, as we talk about this notion of, you know, divorces being on a rise due to coronavirus, as we talk about fighting fear. Unless the Lord builds your house, unless the Lord builds the Smith's house, the Smiths labor in vain. Can you take that Bible verse and put your name in there? Unless the Lord builds the Douglas house, the Douglases labor in vain. Unless the Lord builds the Browns house, the Browns labor in vain. Too many of us are laboring in vain because we're trying to do it in our own strength. We need the power of the Holy Ghost to do this thing right. And so please, you know, review Psalm 127, that first part of that first verse, and really put your household, your family name into that verse, and watch God work. He wants to work in our lives. He wants to work in your home.
Won't he do it?
Won't he do it? He absolutely will.
Yeah.
That time flew by.
Flew by really
Just
fast.
the 2 of us.
Just the 2 of us.
Just the 2 of us. Listen, thank you for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. Remember that we are here every Saturday at 3 p.m. We will be back here again next Saturday with a special guest. What are we talking about next week?
So next week the first of May. Okay, so we will have Dr. Fields, and we will be talking about I think relationship and
money at
finances.
home God's way. Because, you know, finances, lack of finances can be one of the issues that really causes major problems major problems within our marriages. And so we definitely want to talk about that. We want to make sure we give you the tools that you need to be successful in your marriage. So once again, Edward and Debbie Smith, Family Life Coordinators at COTO, Church of the Oranges in Orange, New Jersey. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week, same time, same place.
Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
God bless.